I thought I knew my family until my parents died and left everything to my sister Delilah while I got nothing. Seraphina always managed fine on her own, they said. For 32 years, I watched them shower her with money, bail her out of debt, and buy her houses while I struggled through college loans and medical bills. But when I found the real will hidden in my father's office safe, I discovered the most devastating family secret that would destroy everything Delilah thought she knew about our parents' love. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I want to know where my amazing viewers are watching from today. Are you Team Justice or Team Family Loyalty? Make sure to hit that like button if you are ready for some serious family drama revenge, and do not forget to subscribe because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. Trust me, you will want to see how karma comes full circle in the most satisfying way possible. Now let me tell you exactly how my perfect sister's world came crashing down. My name is Seraphina Mitchell, and I have spent my entire life watching my parents treat my younger sister Delilah like she was made of pure gold, while I might as well have been invisible. From the moment Delilah was born, everything changed in our household. Suddenly, I went from being their precious first daughter to being the responsible one who did not need help, because I was so capable and independent. When I was 8 and Delilah was 5, she broke my grandmother's antique music box during one of her tantrums. Instead of making her apologize or face consequences, my parents bought her an even more expensive replacement and told me I should have put it somewhere safer. That music box had been promised to me since I was 3 years old. That was the first time I realized that in my family, Delilah's wants would always come before my needs. Throughout high school, I maintained a 4.0 grade point average, worked part-time at the local grocery store, and participated in 3 extracurricular activities. Meanwhile, Delilah barely scraped by with C's and spent her afternoons shopping with Mom's credit card. When college application time came, my parents told me I would need to apply for scholarships and student loans because they wanted me to learn responsibility. 6 months later, they handed Delilah a check for $60,000 for her first year at a private liberal arts college where she planned to major in finding herself. I graduated from State University with $47,000 in student loan debt and a degree in accounting. I moved into a tiny studio apartment and worked 60-hour weeks at a small firm while making minimum payments on my loans. Delilah changed majors 4 times, spent a semester in Europe, discovering her artistic soul, and graduated with a degree in art history and 0 debt. My parents paid for everything, including her post-graduation trip to Asia. When I was 26, I got engaged to my college boyfriend, Marcus. We saved for 2 years for a modest wedding, cutting every corner possible. We planned to have the ceremony in my church fellowship hall, with homemade decorations and a potluck reception. My parents offered to contribute $500 to help with flowers or something. I was grateful for anything. 3 months later, Delilah announced she was engaged to Brad, a guy she had been dating for 8 months. My parents immediately started planning what they called the wedding of the century. They rented the country club ballroom, hired a professional photographer, flew in flowers from Oregon, and spent $43,000 on a single day. When I gently asked why they could not help with my wedding the same way my mother said, "Oh, honey, you and Marcus are so practical. You do not need all that fancy stuff. Besides, Delilah has always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding." The pattern continued for years. When I bought my first house, a tiny fixer-upper in a questionable neighborhood, I struggled to save $15,000 for the down payment. My parents toured it once and commented on how cozy it was, which I knew was code for small and disappointing. When Delilah decided she wanted to buy a house 2 years later, my parents gifted her $50,000 for the down payment on a beautiful colonial in the best part of town. Delilah has always been sensitive about her living situation, my mother explained. She needs somewhere that feels safe and beautiful. When Marcus and I had our daughter Emma, we struggled to afford daycare while both working full-time jobs. I asked my parents if they could help watch her occasionally, but they said they were too busy with their own lives to commit to regular babysitting. When Delilah had her son Oliver 2 years later, my parents immediately offered to provide full-time childcare and insisted on converting their guest room into a nursery, so Oliver could stay over whenever Delilah needed me time. The financial favoritism was not even the worst part. It was the constant message that Delilah's problems were real and important, while mine were just life challenges that any capable person should handle alone. When I had complications during Emma's birth and faced $15,000 in unexpected medical bills, my parents said they wished they could help, but were strapped because they had just bought Delilah a new car after she totaled her previous one in a fender bender. When Delilah went through her divorce 3 years later, my parents paid for her lawyer, let her and Oliver move back home rent-free, and spent thousands on therapy to help her heal from the trauma. When Marcus and I separated around the same time due to financial stress and his job loss, my parents said they hoped we could work it out and suggested marriage counseling, which they expected us to pay for ourselves. The breaking point came when my father was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. I immediately offered to help coordinate his care, research treatment options, and assist with medical appointments. My parents thanked me, but said Delilah would be handling everything because she had more time and understood Dad's emotional needs better. They gave Delilah full power of attorney and made her the primary contact for all medical decisions. For 3 years, I watched Delilah manage my father's care from a distance while my parents praised her constantly for her selfless devotion. She hired professional caregivers, which my parents paid for, and visited twice a week for an hour each time. I offered repeatedly to help with the day-to-day care tasks, but Delilah said she had everything under control and did not want to burden me with the responsibility. When my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, 6 months after my father's condition worsened, the same pattern repeated. Delilah was the chosen caregiver, the decision-maker, and the recipient of endless praise for her sacrifice. I was allowed to visit on scheduled occasions and contribute by being supportive of Delilah's choices. Both parents died within 8 months of each other. My father first from complications of his disease, then my mother from the cancer. Through both illnesses and deaths, I felt like an outsider looking in on my own family's tragedy. Delilah planned both funerals, managed both estates, and received all the condolences as the devoted daughter who gave up everything to care for her parents. 3 weeks after my mother's funeral, Delilah called me to discuss the inheritance. We met at a coffee shop near her house, and she delivered the news with what I can only describe as fake sympathy. "Sarah, I know this might be hard to hear, but Mom and Dad left everything to me. They knew I had been taking care of them, and they felt I deserved to inherit the house, the savings, and the investments." She slid a copy of their will across the table. Everything was there in black and white. The family home worth $400,000, their retirement accounts totaling $300,000, their investment portfolio worth $200,000, and even Mom's jewelry collection. My name appeared exactly once in a paragraph stating that I was intentionally excluded from this inheritance because she has always been capable of providing for herself and has never needed financial assistance from us. I sat in that coffee shop, staring at the will, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart. Delilah was trying to look sympathetic, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. This was her final victory in a lifetime competition I never knew I was losing. "I know it seems unfair," she said, stirring her latte with manufactured concern. "But you have to understand I sacrificed so much to take care of them. I gave up my career opportunities, my social life, my chance to travel. They knew I needed this more than you do." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the will in her face and tell her exactly what I thought about her sacrifices and her needs. Instead, I folded the papers calmly and said, "I understand. They made their choice." Delilah looked surprised by my calm reaction. She had probably expected tears, anger, or at least an argument. "I am glad you are being so mature about this, Sarah. I was worried you might contest it or cause family drama." "No drama," I said quietly. "Family is family." But as I drove home that day, something was nagging at me. My father had always been meticulous about legal documents. He had been a small business owner for 30 years and never signed anything without reading it thoroughly. Even in the early stages of his illness, he remained sharp about financial matters. It seemed strange that he would create a will with such harsh language about me, especially since he had never expressed those sentiments directly. That evening, I called my father's longtime attorney, Harold Brennan. Harold had handled my parents' legal affairs for over 20 years, including their business contracts, property purchases, and previous wills. I figured he could at least explain the reasoning behind their decision. "Seraphina, I am so sorry for your loss," Harold said when I reached him. "Your parents were wonderful people. I was honored to serve them all these years." "Thank you, Harold. I am calling about the will. Delilah showed me a copy today, and I have to admit I was surprised by some of the language. It seemed unlike my father to write something so blunt." There was a long pause. "I am sorry, what will are you referring to? The one leaving everything to Delilah. The one that says I am intentionally excluded because I never needed financial assistance." Another pause, longer this time. "Seraphina, I think there might be some confusion. I did not prepare any will with that language. In fact, I have not prepared a new will for your parents in over 5 years." My heart started racing. "What do you mean?" "The last will I prepared for your parents was in 2018. In that document, they left everything split equally between you and Delilah, with specific provisions for your father's business assets and your mother's jewelry collection. They never asked me to change those terms." I felt like the world was spinning. "Harold, could you email me a copy of the will you prepared? I think there might be some kind of mistake." "Of course. I will send it right away." 20 minutes later, I was staring at a completely different document. In the real will, the one prepared by Harold Brennan and properly witnessed, my parents left their estate divided equally between Delilah and me. They even included a heartfelt letter explaining their decision. "We love both our daughters equally and want them both to be financially secure. Seraphina has always been independent and responsible, but that does not mean she deserves less love or support. Delilah has needed more guidance through life, but that does not mean she deserves more of our estate." The will Delilah had shown me was completely fraudulent. I spent the next 2 days in a state of shock trying to process what this meant. My sister had not just inherited everything unfairly, she had committed fraud to steal my rightful inheritance. She had forged legal documents and lied to my face about our parents' final wishes. But I needed proof before I could take action. I needed to find out exactly how she had pulled this off and whether she had help. I started by researching the law firm listed on the fake will. The letterhead said, "Morrison and Associates Legal Services." A quick internet search revealed that no such firm existed in our city. The address listed was a strip mall that housed a dry cleaner and a pizza place. Next, I examined the signatures on the fake will more closely. I am not a handwriting expert, but I had seen my father's signature thousands of times. The signature on the fraudulent document looked similar, but not identical. The M in Mitchell was too rounded, and the overall flow was slightly different. I decided I needed professional help, so I contacted a private investigator named Janet Rodriguez, who specialized in financial fraud cases. Janet had excellent reviews and 20 years of experience with inheritance disputes. When I met with Janet and explained the situation, she was not surprised. "Unfortunately, this happens more often than you might think," she said. "Family members with access to personal information can create convincing fake documents, especially when emotions are running high after a death." Janet's investigation was thorough and shocking. Within a week, she discovered that Delilah had been planning this fraud for over 2 years. She had researched online legal templates, practiced forging our father's signature, and even created fake witnesses by using the names of elderly neighbors who had died recently. But the most devastating discovery was that Delilah had been systematically stealing from our parents for years. Janet found evidence of forged checks, unauthorized credit card usage, and fraudulent power of attorney documents that Delilah had used to access their accounts while they were still alive. The financial records showed that Delilah had taken over $60,000 from their accounts in the 2 years before their deaths. Money, she claimed, was being used for their medical care, but was actually funding her lifestyle. She had been using their credit cards for shopping trips, spa treatments, and expensive dinners, while telling everyone she was sacrificing everything to care for them. Janet also discovered that the professional caregivers my parents supposedly paid for were actually covered by their insurance. Delilah had been pocketing the money my parents gave her for care expenses and using the insurance benefits as well. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Delilah had not just stolen my inheritance. She had been stealing from our dying parents while presenting herself as their devoted caregiver. She had built her entire reputation as the good daughter on a foundation of lies and theft. Armed with this evidence, Janet and I went to Harold Brennan to discuss legal options. Harold was appalled by the scope of the fraud and immediately agreed to help us take action. "This is not just inheritance fraud," he explained. "This is elder abuse, forgery, and theft. Delilah could face serious criminal charges, and you have grounds for a civil lawsuit to recover everything she stole." The next step was confronting Delilah with the evidence. Harold suggested we do it formally with legal representation present to ensure everything was documented properly. He arranged a meeting at his office for the following Tuesday, exactly 3 weeks after Delilah had shown me the fake will. The weekend before our scheduled confrontation with Delilah, I realized I needed more support than just legal representation. This was not going to be a simple document dispute. It was going to be an all-out war that would likely tear our extended family apart. I needed allies who could help me navigate the emotional and social fallout of exposing my sister's crimes. My first call was to my cousin Rebecca, who had always been the truth-teller in our family. Rebecca was 5 years older than me and had watched the favoritism dynamic play out for decades. She had commented on it privately over the years, but never interfered directly. When I told her what I had discovered, she was angry, but not surprised. "I always knew something was off about Delilah's sudden devotion to caring for your parents," Rebecca said. "She had never shown that level of responsibility about anything in her entire life. And the way she kept everyone else at a distance during their illness seemed suspicious." Rebecca agreed to help me document the history of favoritism and financial manipulation since she had witnessed many of the incidents I had described. Her detailed accounts would be crucial for establishing the pattern of Delilah's behavior. Next, I reached out to Marcus, my ex-husband. Despite our divorce, we had maintained a civil relationship for Emma's sake, and he had always been frustrated by how my family treated me. When I explained the situation, he immediately offered to help in any way possible. "Sarah, I watched your family destroy your self-confidence for years," he said. "You deserve justice, and Emma deserves her inheritance. Do whatever you need to do, and I will support you." Marcus had a background in financial analysis from his banking career, and he offered to help review the evidence Janet had gathered. His professional perspective would be valuable for understanding the full scope of the financial fraud. The most important ally I recruited was Dr. Patricia Williams, a geriatric care specialist who had treated my father during his illness. Dr. Williams had always seemed uncomfortable with the family care arrangement, but professional boundaries had prevented her from speaking up. When I contacted her about the fraud investigation, she was willing to provide crucial testimony. "I had concerns about your father's care situation," Dr. Williams admitted. "Delilah was very controlling about access to your parents and seemed more interested in managing their finances than their medical care. Several times I tried to discuss treatment options directly with your father, but Delilah insisted on being present for every conversation and often answered questions for him." Dr. Williams had documentation showing that my father was mentally competent much longer than Delilah had claimed. This was crucial evidence because Delilah had used his supposed incapacity as justification for making financial decisions on his behalf. I also connected with Maria Santos, one of the certified nursing assistants who had provided actual hands-on care for my parents. Maria had been troubled by the discrepancy between what Delilah claimed to be paying for care and what the caregivers actually received. "Your sister told everyone she was paying for 24-hour care," Maria explained. "But we were only there 12 hours a day, and we were paid directly by the insurance company. She never paid us anything directly." Maria's testimony would prove that Delilah had been lying about the care expenses and pocketing the money my parents had given her for that purpose. As we prepared for the confrontation, Harold Brennan suggested we also invite my Aunt Linda, my father's sister, who had been named as executor of the estate in the real will. Aunt Linda lived in another state and had trusted Delilah to handle everything locally, but she had the legal authority to challenge the fake documents. When I called Aunt Linda and explained what I had discovered, she was devastated. "Oh my God, Seraphina, I had no idea. Delilah told me she had found the will among your father's papers and that you had already seen it and agreed with the terms. I never questioned it because I thought you had accepted the situation." Aunt Linda immediately agreed to fly in for the confrontation and to take action as the rightful executor. Her presence would add legal weight to our challenge and demonstrate that we had family support for pursuing justice. The night before the meeting, I gathered all my allies at Rebecca's house to review our strategy. We had boxes of evidence, financial records, medical documentation, witness statements, and expert analysis of the forged documents. Harold had prepared a comprehensive legal brief outlining all the crimes Delilah had committed and the remedies we would be seeking. But I was also emotionally preparing for the reality that this confrontation would end my relationship with Delilah forever. Despite everything she had done, she was still my sister, and I was about to destroy her life. Rebecca helped me process these complicated feelings. "Sarah, you did not create this situation," she reminded me. "Delilah made the choice to steal from your dying parents and lie to your face about it. You are not responsible for the consequences of her actions." Marcus added his perspective. "You have been enabling this behavior your whole life by staying quiet about the favoritism. Emma is watching how you handle this situation. Do you want to teach her that family loyalty means accepting abuse? Or do you want to show her that sometimes you have to fight for what is right?" That put everything in perspective for me. This was not just about money or revenge. It was about justice, accountability, and setting an example for my daughter about standing up to bullies, even when they are family. Dr. Williams, who had joined us for the planning session, offered another perspective. "Your parents trusted you and Delilah equally in their real will. By stealing your inheritance, Delilah has violated their final wishes. You are not just fighting for yourself. You are honoring your parents' memory." As the evening wound down, I felt more confident about our approach. We had solid evidence, expert witnesses, legal support, and family backing. We had documented every aspect of Delilah's fraud and prepared for every defense she might raise. Harold had advised us that Delilah would likely try several tactics, denying the authenticity of the real will, claiming she had permission to take the money, or arguing that she deserved everything because of her caregiving role. We were prepared to counter each of these arguments with specific evidence. Janet Rodriguez had also warned us that Delilah might try to turn other family members against us by claiming we were being greedy or vindictive. That was why having Rebecca, Aunt Linda, and other witnesses on our side was so important. We could not let Delilah control the narrative the way she had controlled everything else. The most crucial element of our strategy was staying focused on the facts rather than getting drawn into emotional manipulation. Delilah was a master at playing the victim and making others feel guilty for questioning her actions. We had to resist that manipulation and stick to the documented evidence of her crimes. As I drove home that night, I felt nervous, but determined. Tomorrow would change everything, but for the first time in my life, I was fighting back against the family dynamics that had oppressed me for 32 years. Win or lose, I would finally stand up for myself and demand the respect I deserved. Emma was staying with Marcus for the week, which was probably for the best. I did not want her to see me this stressed, and I had no idea how ugly things might get once Delilah realized her fraud had been exposed. This confrontation was going to be intense, and I needed to be prepared for anything. The morning of the confrontation, I arrived at Harold Brennan's office feeling confident and prepared. Rebecca Marcus, Dr. Williams, Maria Santos, and Janet Rodriguez were all there, early reviewing our final strategy. We had organized all our evidence into clear categories and prepared responses to every possible defense Delilah might attempt. At exactly 10 o'clock, Delilah walked into the conference room with someone I had not expected, Aunt Linda. My heart sank as I realized what this meant, but I tried to stay hopeful. Maybe Aunt Linda was just there to support the truth. "Hello, everyone," Delilah said calmly, taking a seat across from us. "I understand there are some questions about our parents' will." Harold began the meeting by presenting our evidence methodically. He showed Delilah the real will prepared by his office, the forged document she had created, and the expert analysis proving the fraud. He outlined the financial theft, the elder abuse, and the systematic deception she had perpetrated. Throughout the presentation, Delilah remained remarkably composed. She listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or taking notes. Her calm reaction was unsettling, considering we were accusing her of multiple felonies. When Harold finished, Delilah looked directly at me with what appeared to be genuine sadness. "Sarah, I am so disappointed that you would go to such lengths to challenge our parents' final wishes. I know you are hurting, but this is not the way to handle your grief." Then she played her first card. "Aunt Linda, would you please tell everyone what you discovered when you went through Dad's papers last week?" My aunt stood up slowly, and I could see tears in her eyes. "I am sorry, Seraphina. I wanted to believe you, but when I went back through your father's personal files, I found something that changes everything." She placed a folder on the table and opened it to reveal what looked like a handwritten letter from my father. The letter was dated just 2 months before his death and addressed to "My beloved family." Aunt Linda began reading. "I have been thinking a lot about fairness and what each of my daughters truly needs. Seraphina has always been strong and independent. She has never needed our help the way Delilah has. Delilah has struggled more in life and needs more support to be successful. I believe it is more loving to leave everything to the child who needs it most, rather than splitting things equally just for the sake of appearances." The letter continued for 2 pages, outlining my father's reasoning for leaving everything to Delilah. It discussed my natural capability and Delilah's sensitive nature that requires more nurturing. It even mentioned specific incidents where I had succeeded without help while Delilah had struggled. My world collapsed. The handwriting looked exactly like my father's. The content sounded like things he might actually think, even if he had never said them directly. Aunt Linda, whom I had trusted completely, was now supporting Delilah's version of events. "I found this letter in your father's desk drawer, along with notes he had made about changing his will," Aunt Linda continued. "It is clear that he intended to modify his estate plan, but died before he could complete the legal process with Harold. Delilah was simply carrying out his wishes." Harold examined the letter carefully, but even he seemed shaken. "This is definitely compelling evidence," he admitted. "If this letter is authentic, it suggests that your father did intend to change his will even if he never completed the legal process." Rebecca looked stunned. Marcus was staring at the letter in disbelief. Dr. Williams seemed confused about how this new evidence affected her testimony about my father's mental capacity. Delilah seized the moment. I never wanted it to come to this, but I have been trying to protect everyone from the truth. Dad was embarrassed about wanting to change the will because he knew it would hurt Sarah's feelings. He asked me to handle everything quietly after he died, without making a big production about his reasons. She turned to address our group directly. I understand why you all wanted to support Sarah. She is very good at presenting herself as the victim in family situations. But the reality is that our parents made a conscious decision based on 30 years of watching both daughters live their lives. The room fell silent. I could see doubt creeping into the faces of my allies. Aunt Linda's betrayal was devastating enough, but watching my support system crumble was almost unbearable. Janet Rodriguez asked to examine the letter more closely, but even she seemed less confident than before. The handwriting does appear consistent with the samples we have, she said reluctantly. We would need a professional analysis to determine authenticity, and that could take weeks. Delilah smiled sympathetically. Of course we can have the letter analyzed if necessary, but I hope we can resolve this as a family without dragging lawyers and experts into our private grief. Harold suggested we take a break to discuss the new evidence privately. As my team huddled in his office, I could see the uncertainty in everyone's eyes. The letter had completely shifted the dynamics of our case. I do not understand, I said to Aunt Linda when she joined our private discussion. Yesterday, you were ready to fight for justice. What changed? Aunt Linda looked genuinely conflicted. Sarah, I wanted to believe you, but when I found that letter, I realized I might have been wrong about the whole situation. Your father was a thoughtful man. If he wrote down his reasoning so clearly, maybe we should respect his wishes. Rebecca was the first to break ranks. Maybe we should consider that your parents really did want this outcome, she said quietly. The letter does sound like Uncle Robert. He always worried about Delilah more than you. Dr. Williams excused herself from the group, saying she was not comfortable being involved in a family dispute now that there was contradictory evidence about my father's intentions. Maria Santos also backed away, explaining that she had only agreed to testify about the care arrangements, not about inheritance disputes between family members. Within an hour, my alliance had completely dissolved. Even Marcus seemed uncertain about continuing the fight. Sarah, maybe you should consider accepting this outcome, he said gently. If your father really wanted Delilah to have everything, maybe fighting it will just cause more pain for everyone. I felt utterly alone and defeated. The evidence that had seemed so clear earlier now appeared questionable. My family was turning against me again, just like they had my entire life. Delilah was going to win, just like she always did. As we reconvened with Delilah, she was gracious in victory. I hope we can put this behind us and focus on healing as a family, she said. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I was just trying to honor our parents' wishes. Harold reluctantly agreed to postpone any legal action pending further investigation of the new evidence. Delilah left the meeting with her inheritance intact and her reputation as the devoted daughter restored. I drove home in a daze, feeling more defeated than I had ever felt in my life. Once again, Delilah had manipulated everyone into supporting her version of reality. Once again, I was left alone with my anger and sense of injustice. For 3 days after the disastrous confrontation, I stayed in my house with the curtains closed, barely eating and ignoring phone calls. I felt like the biggest fool in the world for thinking I could finally get justice from my family. Delilah had outplayed me completely, turning my own allies against me with a single piece of paper. On Thursday morning, my doorbell rang. I ignored it, but the person kept ringing and eventually started knocking loudly. When I finally answered, expecting to see Rebecca or Marcus trying to check on me, I found an elderly man I did not recognize. Are you Seraphina Mitchell? He asked politely. Yes, what do you want? My name is Walter Hendricks. I was your father's business partner for 15 years until I retired in 2019. I heard about the dispute over his will, and I believe I have information that might interest you." Something in his serious demeanor made me invite him in. Walter was probably in his 70s with kind eyes and a straightforward manner. He carried a worn leather briefcase that looked like it had seen decades of use. "I apologize for coming to your home uninvited," he said as we sat in my living room. "But I felt I had to speak with someone about what I witnessed before your father's death." Walter opened his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "Your father and I remained close friends after I retired. He often confided in me about family matters, particularly his concerns about Delilah's financial irresponsibility." He handed me a stack of photocopied documents. "About 6 months before he died, your father asked me to help him hide some important papers. He was worried that someone in the family might try to access his personal files inappropriately." My heart started racing as I looked through the documents. There were copies of the real will Harold had prepared, financial records showing unauthorized withdrawals from my parents' accounts, and handwritten notes from my father documenting his suspicions about Delilah's behavior. "Your father suspected that Delilah was stealing from him," Walter continued. "He started keeping duplicate records of everything and asked me to store copies safely. He was planning to confront her, but wanted to have irrefutable evidence first. One document in particular caught my attention, a handwritten note from my father, dated just 3 weeks before his death. It read, "Delilah has been forging my signature on checks. I have compared the signatures, and they are clearly different. She has also been using my credit cards without permission. I need to protect Sarah's inheritance before Delilah tries to take everything." Walter saw me reading the note and nodded grimly. "Your father was very concerned about protecting your future. He specifically asked me to make sure you knew the truth if anything happened to him before he could take action." "Why did you wait so long to come forward?" I asked. "I was out of the country for 2 months after your father died, dealing with my own family emergency. When I returned, I heard that the estate had been settled and assumed everything had proceeded according to the real will. It was only last week that I learned about the dispute and realized what had happened." Walter pulled out one more document that made my hands tremble, a photocopy of the letter Aunt Linda had presented at the meeting. But this copy had something the original did not, a note in my father's handwriting across the top that said, "Practice letter, do not use. This is what Delilah wants me to write." "Your father asked me to read that letter when he first drafted it," Walter explained. "He said Delilah had been pressuring him to write something expressing his intent to leave everything to her. He was troubled by her demands and wrote that practice version to see how it would sound. He decided it was completely unfair to you and never intended to use it." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Delilah had not just forged my father's signature. She had somehow gained access to his private papers and found his practice letter exploring her demands. She had then used that letter to manipulate Aunt Linda into betraying me. Walter reached into his briefcase one more time and produced a small recording device. "Your father also asked me to record one of our conversations about this situation. He wanted a verbal record of his true intentions in case the written documents were ever questioned." He pressed play, and suddenly my father's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakably genuine. "Walter, I need you to understand something very important. If anything happens to me before I can deal with Delilah's theft, I want you to make sure Seraphina knows the truth. The will Harold prepared represents my real wishes. Seraphina and Delilah should inherit equally despite everything Delilah has done. I love both my daughters, but I will not let Delilah steal from her sister." The recording continued for 20 minutes with my father detailing specific instances of Delilah's fraud and his plans to seek legal action. He expressed regret for enabling her behavior over the years and determination to ensure I received fair treatment after his death. "I should have stood up to the favoritism years ago," my father's voice said on the recording. I should have protected Seraphina from our family's tendency to take her for granted. She deserves better from all of us." Walter turned off the recording and looked at me with compassion. "Your father asked me to tell you that he was proud of your independence and strength, but he regretted making you feel like those qualities meant you deserved less love and support." I was crying by this point, overwhelmed by hearing my father's voice defending me and expressing regret for the family dynamics that had shaped my entire life. But I was also energized by the realization that I now had irrefutable proof of Delilah's deception. Walter agreed to accompany me to an emergency meeting with Harold Brennan. When Harold heard the recording and examined the documents, his professional demeanor shifted to barely controlled anger. "This changes everything," he said firmly. "We now have proof that the letter Delilah presented was never intended as a final document, and we have your father's explicit verbal testimony about his true wishes. Combined with the evidence of financial fraud, this gives us grounds for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit." Harold immediately contacted the district attorney's office to report the elder abuse and fraud. He also reached out to Aunt Linda to inform her that she had been deceived and manipulated into supporting Delilah's criminal activities. When Aunt Linda learned the truth about the letter, she was horrified and immediately switched sides again. "I cannot believe I let her manipulate me like that," she said tearfully. "I should have trusted my first instincts about Seraphina's character." Walter also helped me reconnect with Dr. Williams and Maria Santos, both of whom were outraged to learn how Delilah had used the confusion to discredit their testimony. They both agreed to provide statements to law enforcement about the patterns of deception they had witnessed. Janet Rodriguez was thrilled to have the additional evidence and immediately expanded her investigation based on the new information Walter had provided. She discovered even more instances of fraud, including forged insurance claims and unauthorized access to my parents' safe deposit box. Within a week of Walter's visit, I had rebuilt my alliance with even stronger evidence and more credible witnesses. But more importantly, I had heard my father's voice telling me that I deserved justice and that my family's treatment of me had been wrong. This time, I was not just fighting for money or revenge. I was fighting to honor my father's true wishes and to ensure that Delilah faced consequences for betraying the trust of our dying parents. The truth was finally going to come out, and no amount of manipulation could stop it. The second confrontation with Delilah took place in the district attorney's office 3 weeks later. This time, there were no conference rooms or family discussions. This was an official criminal investigation, and Delilah was facing serious charges. Detective Sarah Morrison led the interview with Harold Brennan and the prosecutor present as witnesses. I sat in the observation room with Walter Hendricks watching through one-way glass as my sister's carefully constructed lies finally crumbled. When Detective Morrison played the recording of my father's voice describing Delilah's theft, her composure broke completely. She tried to claim the recording was fake, but voice analysis confirmed its authenticity. She attempted to argue that our father was confused due to his illness, but medical records showed he was mentally sharp when the recording was made. Finally, when presented with Walter's documentation showing the practice letter was never intended for use, Delilah abandoned all pretense and launched into a furious tirade that revealed her true character. "You have no idea what I sacrificed for this family," she screamed at Detective Morrison. "Sarah got all the praise for being independent while I got stuck with all the emotional labor. I deserved that inheritance because I am the one who actually loved them." Her lawyer tried to calm her down, but Delilah was beyond reason. She never visited them. She never called. She was too busy with her perfect little life to care about her dying parents. I was there every day, dealing with their medications and their doctors and their emotional needs. Detective Morrison let her continue knowing that every word was being recorded and would strengthen the prosecution's case. Delilah's rant revealed not only her sense of entitlement, but also her complete lack of remorse for her crimes. "I took that money because they owed it to me," she continued. Do you know how much I spent on gas driving to their house? How many opportunities I missed because I was taking care of them? Sarah should be grateful I handled everything, so she did not have to be bothered. The interview concluded with Delilah being formally charged with elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and theft. The prosecutor also announced that they would be seeking restitution for all the money she had stolen, plus penalties and interest. The civil lawsuit moved forward simultaneously. Harold filed motions to freeze all of Delilah's assets pending resolution of the case, including the house she had inherited and the investment accounts she had accessed illegally. The legal proceedings took 8 months to fully resolve, but the outcome was everything I had hoped for and more. Delilah pled guilty to multiple felony charges and was sentenced to 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. She was ordered to pay full restitution of over $120,000, plus additional fines and court costs. The civil court ruled that the fraudulent will was completely invalid and that the estate should be distributed according to the real will Harold had prepared. I received my full inheritance, including half of the house, half of the investment accounts, and half of my mother's jewelry collection. But more importantly, the truth about our family's dynamics was finally exposed publicly. Extended family members who had always assumed I was selfish or ungrateful learned about the systematic favoritism and manipulation I had endured for decades. Many of them reached out to apologize for not recognizing what was happening. Rebecca was one of the first to make amends. "I am so sorry I doubted you during the first confrontation," she said. "I should have remembered that Delilah has always been manipulative. I should have trusted your character over her performance." Aunt Linda was devastated by her role in almost derailing the case. She asked if she could do anything to make up for her mistake, and I asked her to write a letter to Emma explaining what had happened and why it was important to stand up for justice, even when family members try to discourage you. The financial windfall from the inheritance was significant, but the emotional vindication was even more valuable. For the first time in my life, I had official confirmation that the favoritism I had experienced was real and wrong. My father's recorded words gave me closure about his true feelings and regrets about how the family had treated me. I used part of the inheritance to pay off my remaining student loans and Emma's college fund. I also bought a beautiful house in the neighborhood where I had always wanted to live, with a big backyard for Emma and space for the art studio I had always dreamed of having. But the most important change was in my relationships. Walter Hendricks became like a surrogate grandfather to Emma and me. He had stories about my father's younger years that helped me understand him as a complex person rather than just a disappointing parent. Walter also introduced me to his extended family, who welcomed us warmly and gave us a sense of belonging we had never experienced with my biological relatives. Dr. Williams and I became friends after the legal proceedings ended. She helped me understand the medical aspects of what my parents had gone through and assured me that I had not failed them by being excluded from their care. Her professional perspective helped me release guilt I had been carrying for years. Marcus and I did not reconcile romantically, but our friendship deepened through the experience of fighting for justice together. He told Emma about how her mother had been brave enough to stand up to bullies, and Emma started expressing pride in having a mother who fights for what is right. The most unexpected relationship that developed was with Maria Santos, the nursing assistant, who had cared for my parents. Maria had been raised in foster care and understood what it meant to create chosen family from people who truly care about you. She and her children became regular fixtures at our dinner table, and Emma gained the cousins she had always wanted. As I finish telling you this story, it has been 2 years since Delilah was sentenced. She has reached out from prison several times trying to apologize and rebuild our relationship, but I have decided to maintain no contact. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive, and I have learned that family loyalty should never require accepting abuse. Emma is now 16 and incredibly proud of how her mother fought for justice. She has learned lessons about standing up to bullies, the importance of documentation and evidence, and the difference between real family and people who happen to share your DNA. She calls Walter Grandpa Maria's children, her cousins, and Dr. Williams, her bonus aunt. My chosen family is smaller than my biological family, but it is built on genuine love, respect, and mutual support. We celebrate each other's successes without jealousy, support each other through challenges without keeping score, and treat each other with the dignity every person deserves. The inheritance money has certainly made life easier, but the real treasure was discovering that I am worthy of love, respect, and fair treatment. My father's recorded words gave me permission to stop accepting less than I deserve, and Walter's friendship showed me what healthy family relationships actually look like. Now, I want to hear from all of you who have made it to the end of this incredible journey with me. Have you ever experienced favoritism in your own family that made you question your worth? Have you had to choose between family loyalty and standing up for yourself? Did my story inspire you to take action in your own situation? Or do you think I should have handled things differently? Please share your own family drama experiences in the comments below, because I know many of you have stories that would shock even me. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button to let me know justice stories are what you want to see more of. Make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because I am planning a whole series about family karma and the moment when people finally get what they deserve. And please share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they deserve better treatment from their family members. Sometimes we all need permission to stop accepting behavior that diminishes our worth. And I hope my experience can help someone else find the courage to fight for what is right. Thank you for taking this journey with me. And remember that your value as a person is not determined by how your family treats you. Sometimes the best thing you can do is create a new family with people who actually see your worth. Until next time, keep fighting for justice and never settle for less than you deserve.